couple things going on. First, let's take a look at the second day, the trial in the Eastern District of Virginia. That would be in Alexandria, the courthouse there, of Manafort. The Washington Post had a very interesting timeline. At 10:02 a.m., Judge Ellis tells prosecutors, stop using the word oligarch. You see, what the prosecution's trying to do here is they're trying to create a narrative and trying to create the most negative possible description of what Mueller was up to. I don't know Mueller. I don't know if he's innocent. Go. That's not my point. And so the judge is saying, wait a minute. He says here, I quote, an oligarch is just a despotic power exercised by a privileged few. What I want to avoid, he says to the prosecutor, is somehow to use the term to mean he was consorting or paid by people who were criminals. There will be no evidence of that. The prosecutor protested that the people funding Manafort's work in Ukraine are commonly referred to there as oligarchs. Political consultant Tad Devine, who, by the way, worked for Bernie Sanders, described one such man as an oligarch in his testimony. Ellis interrupted the prosecutor. If the term just referred to a billionaire involved in politics, Ellis said, then both George Soros and the Koch brothers would qualify. The term oligarch has come to have a pejorative meaning, the judge said. We're not going to have this case find that he associated with despicable people and therefore he's despicable. That's not the American way. Ellis said the government could file a brief on the issue if they want, but didn't think the use of the term was necessary. And why is the... Look, he's being accused of bank fraud and other types of fraud, right? So the judge is saying, okay, prove your case. Prove your case. The witnesses go on. They talk about money transfers and so forth. And then the prosecution gets into what they saw in the Manafort apartment, the types of clothing they saw and other things, very lavish. And so again, what the prosecutor is doing, the government's doing, Mueller's team is doing, is trying to get the jury to turn on Manafort because he's rich and he has a lot of money and he buys a lot of stuff. Well, that didn't get past the judge. Washington Post, transcribing what took place. After the defense raised an objection to prosecutors introducing an invoice, seized an FBI raid of his home for proposed work on a Manafort home, Judge Ellis dismissed the jury for a break and then grilled prosecutors for a second time. Ellis expressed skepticism over how the invoice actually advanced the prosecutor's case that Manafort filed false tax returns and didn't fully report money he had made to the Internal Revenue Service. Furthermore, the judge worried that it might prejudice the jury against Manafort. The judge asked Assistant U.S. Attorney Uzo Asanye if it showed just that Manafort is awash in money. Asanye argued that document furthered the prosecution's case because it showed that Manafort had hid money from tax preparers and a bookkeeper, and that he used money from accounts in Cyprus to pay for a long list of luxury items. Those expenditures were never reported on the tax returns. Ellis said he would take the argument under advisement and decide later whether to allow the invoice to be introduced. Ellis has signaled some displeasure with the prosecution's case, grousing that it, quote, is gilding the lily. I understand exactly what he means. Make your case. Use your facts. Why are you using all these rhetorical arguments? The reason is they're hoping that again, it'll persuade the jury. His lavish spending is irrelevant. The judges interrupted prosecutors on occasion to speed up their questioning and bluntly question them at other moments. Interesting. Then, a few minutes later, the judge said that while he hasn't seen it himself, he's been told that lawyers on both sides have been rolling their eyes after leaving bench conferences. The implication, he said, is, why do we have to put up with this idiot judge? Don't do that, he told the lawyers. It's inappropriate. He said that if he had seen it himself, I might be a little upset, but that his eyes are not what they were 40, 50, or 60 years ago. He's 78 years old. Rein in your facial expressions, he said. And so then the judge rules later, about an hour later, that the prosecution cannot enter an invoice for proposed home renovation, saying all this document shows is that Mr. Manafort had a lavish lifestyle. He had a nice home with a pool and a gazebo. It's not relevant. He also expressed concern about showing the jury photos of Manafort's expensive suits, although prosecutors said it was necessary to prove the defendant bought and kept those items. To parade all of this again seems to me unnecessary, the judge said. The judge's skepticism could be troublesome for prosecutors who are trying to present the case that Manafort lived a life of luxury but paid no taxes or money here. You don't need to show his suits to make that case. You don't need to show invoices to make that case. You got the entire IRS working for you. You're asserting that the man didn't pay his taxes. What's your evidence? Certainly it's not the suits. Now, on Manafort's items from a place called House of Bijan, a menswear company that bills itself as the world's most expensive, Ellis expressed confusion. He was joking around. He said, look, if it's not Men's Warehouse, I don't even know what that means. Now, something rather remarkable happening during the course of today's case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Uzo Osanye surprised the judge when he casually mentioned that Richard Gates, Paul Manafort's former partner, remember he flipped for the state, and the expected star witness of the case may or may not testify. What? The prosecutor was responding to a question about an agenda from a meeting with Gates in 2013. He may testify, he may not, Assange said of Gates. We're trying to shorten the trial. Prosecutors said that was not because of anything particular to Gates. Every witness, he said, might not be necessary depending on how the evidence unfolds. Ellis, the judge, said it was news to him, and obviously many others. He saw these reporters leaving the courtroom to report it, and he said, 25 people just scurried out here like rats leaving a sinking ship. Gates not taking the stand would be a curious development in the case. Prosecutors had accused Gates of being a participant in most of the fraud, the alleged fraud, it should say, that Manafort is charged with. And he would be able to provide an intimate window into what they were doing. Earlier this year, Gates pleaded guilty to conspiracy and lying to the FBI and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. But here's why they're not sure what to do. They may eventually put him up. But Manafort's lawyers, the defense counsel, have made Gates the centerpiece of their defense. They've said Gates embezzled money from their business, and the fraud was meant to hide his own misdeeds. Manafort is saying, look, I wasn't the guy handling the money. Gates handled it. I relied on Gates, the prosecution's key witness, who just made a deal with the prosecution in order to save himself and get me. Rick Gates had his hand in the cookie jar, and he couldn't take the risk that his boss might find out, one of Manafort's defense attorneys said. Isn't that interesting? Assistant U.S. Attorney Uzo Asanye surprised everybody in that regard. As Rachel Weiner explained in her post looking at the characters in the Manafort trial, Gates and Manafort were close, she wrote. Gates started his career as an intern at the aggressive, controversial political consulting firm Manafort co-founded, working closely with Republican lobbyist Rick Davis. Gates left the firm to work for companies in the lottery and gaming business. Former partner Charlie Black has said. But he reunited with Davis and Manafort at the new firm in 2006 and became, in the words of his indictment, Manafort's right-hand man. Manafort had just begun doing political consulting work for an aspiring Ukrainian politician with ties to Russian oligarchs. So in other words, the defense is saying, okay, great. That, in your own filings, you say was Manafort's right-hand man. We agree. He's the guy. To the extent there is any graft, who pulled it off? Now the prosecution's saying, well, we're not sure we're going to actually put him on the stand or not. Of course, defense counsel can put him on the stand. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Mark, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the great WPHT. I sound like I'm talking to myself. My name, my hometown. Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call. About the Manafort trial, all this extraneous evidence, why didn't Manafort's lawyer make an application to the court to suppress and preclude all of those arguments and all of this silly evidence that the prosecutors are trying to bring in? Because I'm sure that if they're having these arguments in front of the jury in open court...
No. He sent the jury out.
I'm sorry?
The judge sent the jury out.
Oh, okay. But they should have...
But you're still making a good point. They should look at this evidence and then decide what they want to get out and tell the judge. Your point is they shouldn't wait for the judge to tell them what they should be doing. They should just do it. Right.
They should have just done that weeks ago, and then they could have argued it with the judge, and then the judge said, okay, this is in, this is out, this is out.
I don't know how to answer that. That's a good point. Here, another good call. I'll tell you what, don't hang up. We're going to send you a copy of Rediscovering Americanism. Don't hang up, Philly. All right, make sure that gentleman gets a book, too. I'm not hawking these books. These books are done. I hope people read them. I'll be right back. As you know, we spent some time on the Manafort trial, and we all know why Manafort is in the dock, and it's because he was Trump's campaign manager for 4 or 5 months. All these allegations against him occurred before he was Trump's campaign manager. They occurred when Mr. Mueller, the special counsel, was the FBI director. Think about that. But now it all comes to a head. Why? It's a disgrace. This isn't even part of the special counsel's original mandate. It's expanded to include responsibility. I'm telling you, this is the Achilles heel. Professor Calabresi and I are correct. This is the Achilles heel. The more power he has, the more he acts like a United States attorney, the more it is clear that it's a violation of the Appointments Clause of the Constitution.